Will Baltimore, Maryland be America's next pro soccer city? Major League Soccer lays off their armchair analyst, and we dig into the USL labor impasse with the soccer lawyer. That and much more on Friday's edition of Morning Kick Around. Hello and welcome to the show. You found your way to Morning Kick Around, the show that dots the map of the ever-changing American soccer landscape. My name, Robert Kerr, local soccer guy, and to my side, my partner in this adventure, Jason Davis, radio soccer guy. How you doing?
Happy Friday the 13th, Rob. Are you one of those guys superstitious about Friday the 13th? Do you worry about black cats walking across your path? Do you have fears around I don't know, horseshoes or something? What how do you feel about that? Friday the 13th.
I don't believe in superstitious things, but if I look in retrospect, my life did go to hell after I smashed a mirror my freshman year in college. So maybe there was something to it, but I did not even realize it was Friday the 13th. You said it till now, so I guess I'm not a spooky extremist.
I'm not that person either. Actually, today is mostly about tomorrow in my house, not because my beautiful wife is pushing any demands around the Valentine's Day holiday. She's actually doing her Galentine's tonight, so she'll have a good time. But because, when you have a 5-year-old and he's in preschool, you have to do that thing where every kid in the class has to get a Valentine. So last night we spent hours with him trying to write the names of all of his classmates and then also his name multiple times. He wrote his name about 6 or 7 times before he went, "Papa, I'm bored. Tabarino, I don't want to do this anymore." And so, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I guess the dopamine hit of writing your own name only lasts so long. And I got to admit, I get a little bit of a pass Valentine's Day. All 3 of my family members all have birthdays in the last couple of weeks. So my thoughtfulness and generosity meter is maxed out. And so if I just, say happy Valentine's,
can I use that? Can I use that to talk about the generosity and what was the other thing you said? The what meter? What? The generosity?
Thoughtfulness meter?
Thoughtfulness and generosity. Shout out to James up there in Rhode Island, who is now our newest member here on Morning Kick Around. We are going to dot the map a little bit at the end of the show. We got a lot to talk about today, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on this on the front end because there's news. We're going to talk about stadiums, and you mentioned Baltimore already in the open there. If you are wondering, you mentioned armchair analyst, no longer with Major League Soccer, soccer.com. I am going to talk about soccer media a bit. If anybody's interested in that, I've written about it this morning. You can find that on the newsletter. I did a whole thing with Jonathan Tannewald on Wednesday night on the Best Soccer Show after this news dropped, but I'm refining our thoughts, and I want to talk to the ultras and to the listeners of this program, the viewers of this program, about where they feel American soccer media is. So that look for that at the end of the show.
Yeah, lots to get to, so we will do so and move right along. Top of the hour, we have Andrew Wisnowski, the soccer lawyer, to dig into the legal side and what tactics we might see in the USL labor negotiations. Obviously, the MLS stuff and soccer under construction, 2 different cities we'll dip into. Before we get into that, we got to remind you, our longest and biggest stream to date is coming on Wednesday, February 18th. Next week, get in there. Special guests, games, surprises, and some fun. Wednesday, February 18th, normal starting time, but we are going to go longer than we have to date. If you'd like to support the show here today, you can become an MK Ultra, send in a super thanks, or even just tell a friend. And then also, we are on social media. Give us a follow along there at MKickaround on all the social media platforms, or write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com for notes, questions, tips, or business inquiries. All right, let's get to the show. We're kicking it off today, though, on Friday with soccer under construction. Soccer under construction here on Morning Kick Around. DC United submitted a proposal to build a brand new 12,000 capacity professional soccer stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. It's going to be built for a professional women's club and an MLS Next Pro team, just 3 miles west of the Inner Harbor. So, what do we got to do when we hear news like this, eh?
Oh yeah, we're gonna debut something here now. This is an organic development around here. This came out of something that Rob said, I don't know, a month or so ago, 2 months ago, Rob, and we're going to determine what the level of this is. But here you go. We have
Clang the clanger
Clanger for Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore, Maryland. We're clanging the clanger. Now, we have established, because you might wonder, what is the difference between clanging the clanger and dotting the map? We dot the map with our ultras, but we also dot the map with American soccer clubs. That's what we're talking about here. This is abundance theory when it comes to American soccer. The more clubs, the better. Let's just start clubs everywhere and see what happens. We never tried that before. Let's do it. And I will say that, I have some doubts around this plan. I have some doubts around some of these proposed clubs. But clanging the clanger is just announcing somebody has an intention to bring pro soccer to a place, Rob. Is that what that's about?
Yeah, narrowing the eyeballs. It's like I meant to say sound the alarm, but instead we clang the clanger. Basically, all eyes on X city. And today, we mentioned it earlier in the week, saying Baltimore, huge city, no soccer team. What's going on? And here we are. Just the same week we talked about that. Baltimore, Maryland, 12K MLS Next Pro. A women's pro team. They don't declare what league that would be in, but also a familiar celebrity involved.
Yeah, well, okay, you mentioned the women's team. I do think, like, for all of the talk here about how DC United has been planning an MLS Next Pro team in Baltimore for years, promising the updates for years on this. Go follow I'm going to get Douglas's last name backwards, and I apologize. And I think he was telling us he was suspended from Blue Sky. Douglas Reyes Sharon on Blue Sky. Douglas is a guy who keeps track of stuff like this. He's a DC area guy. He'll tell you, Jason Levian was promising, the owner of the DC United, was promising something on Baltimore months ago and didn't deliver. He said, in 48 hours, we'll have an update. And then we waited a long time before this news dropped, which is, again, why there must be some concern over how real any of this all is. But for all the talk about DC United and MLS Next Pro, the bigger story is if this is a first division team in Baltimore, Rob, like if for women, if they say now, let's remember the USL Super League, first division. That's a first division soccer league in America. I have not heard anything about NWSL being interested in Baltimore. We just had a competition between multiple cities to get the latest NWSL expansion franchise, which ended up being Denver Summit. So I don't think this is NWSL, right? Like, it seems pretty obvious that whatever that celebrity you mentioned, a certain gentleman named Carmelo Anthony, and here he is with one of his failed soccer investments, Puerto Rico FC, a club very near and dear to my heart, as you can imagine. He is involved. He's a Baltimore guy. He's involved. You can see there, Carroll Park Golf Course. That's the proposed location for the 12,000 seat stadium and other things, right? Did you mention the other things that are attached to this? A building for gym and facility.
40,000 square feet building.
A practice facility. Like, this is supposed to be a big project. Price tag, $300 million. And DC United is saying they are going to put up $100 million of this money. So they are very much dependent on money from the city, from the Maryland Stadium Authority, in order to get this off the ground. So again, I think you could be cynical about the way it looks like, the way it looks on paper here from what they've announced. You can be cynical about it. I wouldn't blame you, but let's hope, again, because we're in the abundance era of American soccer, because we're clanging the clanger and dotting the map, that this gets off the ground. I'll also say, just as an aside, these are the Jordan 5s that were created for Carmelo Anthony's Puerto Rico FC club. I'm still trying to figure out how I get my hands on these. I can't let a Carmelo Anthony and soccer mention go by without bringing up these shoes. And I'd also say that Carmelo Anthony played a role in the NASL versus U.S. Soccer lawsuit, if you don't remember that, because he was put on the stand to be asked about some of the things that had happened around his club and around NASL. And I think that ended up being a bit of a nothing burger, but I just think it's fascinating. A guy who's already been burned once by investing in soccer in America. Yes, he was doing it in Puerto Rico. Yes, that's a territory. No, it's not the mainland. But a guy who was burned once by soccer investment is coming back for more, Rob. He's coming back for more.
Yeah, that's some stick-to-itiveness from Mr. Anthony. You'd think that having to be put on the stand in a major legal battle would maybe make you a little gun shy, but apparently Carmelo, a lover of soccer investment, and this has been obviously a fraught and lengthy process. Maryland Stadium Authority first approved conducting a stadium study for a soccer-specific stadium in Baltimore in 2022. And this site they picked is an 80-acre golf course called Carroll Park Golf Course, which has been a public golf course since 1923. The Baltimore mayor, Brandon Scott, is on board with this idea, and he identified this golf course as the least used golf course in the area. So underutilized open space seems to make sense for a soccer whole campus here with all those buildings.
Yeah, a couple of other details to throw on top because this is the speculation phase. There and things that maybe matter to how big this can possibly get. And Ian Quillen at Forbes is the source to go to for a lot of these details. He wrote a pretty comprehensive piece, more than just a news hit, a mention. This was detail filled. So the club and the city announced Carroll Park in the city southwest, the desired stadium construction site, following a feasibility study that was funded by D.C. and the Maryland Stadium Authority. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott was influential in the decision. He's the one that was pushing this neighborhood. The legislature of Maryland also approved a $217 million, let me make sure I have this right, because $216 million of state funds introduced bills, not approved, introduced bills. Obviously, that bills have to go through a process. So this is a possible public-private project that is not yet confirmed, not yet funded completely. Now, Ian also reports that Jason Levian, owner of DC United, the guy who says he's putting up $100 million of the total price tag, he appears open to the idea that Baltimore could eventually earn MLS expansion rights as an outgrowth of MLS Next Pro being in town. And then noted that was a trajectory that other markets have followed. That feels so wildly down the road and speculative that it almost feels irresponsible. Now, Ian has to report on this if Levian says he is open to it. And what's interesting, of course, if you know DC area sports, you'll know that that's fascinating for a DC franchise to be open to a Baltimore team, which is in the general geographic area. The DC and Baltimore are basically one big metropolitan area. DC is 45 minutes from Baltimore on a good day in traffic. Me takes an hour and a half, but I'm south of DC. And this is in light of, or this, the history of DC wanting a baseball team, and Peter Angelos and the Baltimore Orioles, Peter Angelos, the owner of the Orioles at the time, basically blocking DC from getting a baseball team for a couple of decades because they claimed it would undercut their business. I just think that that's interesting background.
That is a good note there. And we're getting some comments from the Ultras about the possible location of the women's team or the league that they're in. And Chris, great authority on the lower leagues in the United States, saying that DC Power is in the USL Super League. So that would likely be the women's team right there. And then a couple other people chiming in. Apparently, we might need some more sound effect. They're saying that was the shortest clang they've ever heard at the top.
They want more clang?
They want more clang. Yeah, so now that the eyes are on Baltimore for a brand new soccer stadium project, we should definitely call and sound and clang the clanger. Here we go, Baltimore. That's some thoroughly clanged clanger. And now we have to figure out what's the reverse of that when a plan shrinks back into itself. Is it
right?
Whatever that is. But let's get to the clangers out of the way. Now let's go to an opposite news story. Let's go to our next story in soccer under construction. From a positive story in soccer expansion in the country to the middle of the country with less positive news, Senate President pro tempore Roderick Bray said this week, it doesn't look like there's much chance there when it comes to building that Major League Soccer stadium in Indianapolis.
Yeah, this is obviously I don't think this should be surprising, right? The idea that Indy was just going to roll out the red carpet, figure out a way to build a Major League Soccer level venue after all this back and forth and all of the issues with Indy 11 and their aspirations to build their own stadium, and then the mayor of Indianapolis swooping in and saying, hey, actually, we're not a second division city. We're a Major League Soccer city, and we need Major League Soccer. And then all of this kind of unraveling, I don't think should be a massive surprise. It was supposed to be a 20,000 seat stadium. Again, it was Mayor Joe Hogsett who was pushing this, splashing headlines in 2024, pledging support, pledging that the city would submit a formal bid, that they would bring Major League Soccer to Indianapolis. All of it kind of just exploding here, going up in smoke. Now, Rob, maybe we need to figure out exactly what this means for Indy 11, if anything, right? If this is not moving forward, does Indy 11 get a chance now to kind of come back around and get that downtown location that they wanted to build their stadium? I think there have been plenty of allocations and probably rightfully made that a lot of what Indy 11 was doing was the land grab, was the speculation, was the taking advantage of trying to make soccer a civic property that then could be leveraged into grabbing private land for development in other ways, right? Because the owner of Indy 11, that's what he does. So it's not a stretch to imagine this was all kind of a long-term play. And I don't know, this seems very, very messy.
Very messy indeed. You have Indy 11 trying to go downtown. They destroy an old building. They find all sorts of relics and things. There's lots of costs involved. Mayor swoops in, says, hey, we're not doing that. We're doing a Major League Soccer build out in the city. So there's no room for two of those projects. I believe last I checked with one of my folks at the Indy 11 front office, they said that whole downtown plan was scrapped and they were looking elsewhere outside of the city for that soccer-specific stadium for Indy 11. So is there an Uno reverse card and they go back downtown? That's hard to see, but dead on arrival, according to some big wigs there in
what element of this story that deserves mention, and one that we need to wrap our heads around, and I seeing mention of it in the chat. There was a heliport idea. They wanted to build a heliport, and the guy who owns part of Indy 11, Chuck Surak, I don't know. You people and your Midwestern names. I can't keep up with pronunciation.
Don't throw me in with those Indiana people.
Oh, okay. He owns Sweet Helicopter. That's the name of his company. He owns Sweet Helicopter. And I guess there's a heliport there, and he operates other facilities in Indiana. He bid $15 million for the heliport in Indianapolis, but the Indianapolis Airport Authority accepted the city's offer, which, again, this was all wrapped up in the idea of building the soccer stadium. So you've got a guy who has an interest in soccer in Indianapolis, but not in the MLS plan because that's not connected to Indy 11, and Ursal Ozdemir, the majority owner of Indy 11, who has an interest in the heliport, which is what the mayor was using as potentially talking about where to put. This is so wild, this stuff that it's all tied up together, billionaires and millionaires fighting over things like this, and us little people are left here going, what's happening exactly?
I just want to sit here and cheer for a soccer ball going in the back of the net And here we are in real estate and high level politics. It's like
I know,
ball
right?
go in, we
Yeah.
cheer. That's the root of things getting a little bit convoluted here, and this could definitely be a segment of U.S. soccer being weird. Maybe, just I don't know how many other countries across the world would get into a situation like this, but puts Indy 11 in a weird territory. I'm curious where they go from here. Like I said, if they could go back to it. And there's even a commenter saying that the guy pushing the MLS project is a minority in Indy 11. So there's a little bit of a cannibalism situation going in there. But
Okay.
a
Yeah.
lot of interests going in different directions in Indianapolis at the
Yeah,
moment.
I mean, this is soccer wars run amok, right? And we've talked about how often American soccer has cannibalized itself over its history. We seem to run into this problem on a regular basis, which is, hey, we've got something decent going. This looks great. And somebody else comes in and goes, actually, I got a better idea. And I'm going to undercut or I'm going to eat up some of your market share. And what happens in the end? Nobody succeeds. Everything goes up in smoke. Everything collapses and we're left with nothing. There are stories of cities getting teams again and restarting. Or we're going to see what happens in Fresno, for example. That's maybe not a soccer war situation, but hey, we couldn't get the stadium deal we needed to make this work. Now suddenly there's an appetite to build a stadium. I think about Austin, Texas, which is an interesting case. That there were two different minor league lower division teams in Austin, Texas, and in both cases, they collapsed because the owners had interest elsewhere, right? Because you had somebody say, I mean, the fact that we eventually got an MLS team in Austin is really not about people doing right by soccer. It's about people wanting to kind of leverage Austin and what it was in the moment. So I don't know. It's tough because what we want is clubs to be established, to bring soccer to a community that wants it, to connect in those deep ways that we certainly covet when it comes to English clubs or European clubs, or even in our other American sports, where even though we know those are commercial enterprises, you are so deeply attached to the Red Sox or the Cowboys or the whatever, the Detroit Lions, God help you, that you that it becomes part of your relationship and your civic identity. And every time people go, soccer, it's awesome. We're gonna have a soccer team and it's part of my civic identity. And I'm very proud of my team and my city. And they go, whoop, actually, no, we don't have a stadium, or somebody else wants to take this team out of town, or the owner decided he doesn't have enough money anymore. I don't know. It's very sad. I hope that Indy 11, whatever happens with these back and forth in MLS and the stadium plan and everything else, hope Indy 11 gets a chance to build a proper soccer stadium, the right size for that club, that maybe they can grow into and maybe they can build out from and be not just a first division team in USL, but potentially down the road, if we do get an integrated pyramid, find their place in the top division, the highest level of American soccer.
Going into the comments here on this topic, Homeless Shoe, we should be more okay with building stadiums outside of downtown. We like there was a whole generation of giant stadiums built out in the suburbs, and I think that we all kind of want our stadiums and our homes of our teams to be, closer to where we live and where we commune. But yes, that does lead to real estate battles like this. That's obviously downtown land is highly sought after land, and
Highly
so
sought after. Well,
you get
generally speaking.
into some dicey political and real estate
But
territory
also,
with that.
you say downtown land is highly sought after. Generally speaking, that's true. It depends on the
Often.
town you're talking about. But also, there's these places where you have a parcel of land that is either downtown or downtown adjacent that is not being utilized, right? That needs to be revitalized in some way, or it becomes this thing where towns are looking at these spaces and going, we should revitalize that. And then, okay, how do we do that? Right? What private enterprise will want to come in and spend the money necessary to revitalize that part of town? Oh, well, maybe a soccer club will do it. But then again, these soccer clubs are owned by people who see these opportunities to expand their other businesses, right? Which again doesn't have to be bad. Right? It can be dual intentions. It can be, I want a soccer team and I want a stadium and I want to bring something great to our town and people can rally around this. We'll have a sports team that we can love, and soccer's so great, and I love soccer. Oh, but also I want to make some money with some hotels and some apartments and some shops in a park or that can draw people. Hopefully that's a public park. But that becomes part of this. And then, like we're seeing in Baltimore, the city, the civic authorities, the state somehow gets wrapped up in this, right? Incentivizing development. Now, again, this is what abundance is about on some level. The idea that we need to help fund these things so we can lift up these areas and benefit everybody in a town or a city or a state. It just, when you get to the details, is where it becomes who is using whom. Is that a thing? Is this truly a partnership where everyone benefits, or ultimately are very wealthy private enterprises and human beings being given more money at the public's expense?
So with mine, I don't have a 100% grasp and full knowledge that I know exactly what you mean by the abundance theory. So I was thinking in my mind right now in this period of American soccer growth and expansion and what everything that USL is doing. So in abundance, we're saying we try to add as many teams and then hope as many hold on for dear life. Is that what is that abundance theory is?
Yeah,
Like,
the
so we add
idea,
25
it's a
teams
very
and hopefully 10 of them
it's
stay.
it's a very reductive idea, reductive way of talking about growth in American soccer, right? And I'm not actually going to tie it to every element of what abundance theory in political thought. I go read Ezra Klein's book if you so choose, right? And I know that there's lots of people who don't like Ezra Klein right now for a lot of reasons. I'm not tying it directly to that political idea as much as I'm saying the word works for, yes, just flood the zone with clubs. Like, do whatever it takes to get clubs started. Now, will some of those clubs have very questionable plans about long-term survival? Absolutely, they will. Will some of them have issues potentially arising with stadiums? Possibly, although I think that one thing you can say about USL is they've been relatively conscious of that being the biggest problem for these clubs, the biggest hurdle to clear, the biggest pitfall, and are looking for solutions that, number one, don't cost the club a lot of money, and number two, are actually relatively proper venues for soccer, right? We shouldn't be playing soccer if we can avoid it on high school football fields with artificial surface and painted on gridiron lines that you can't get rid of, which without the enclosed stadium environment that actually creates a place people want to go to. All these things, right? All these elements of what a proper soccer stadium looks like. So what I'm saying is, with the idea of what abundance is, it is that. It is start them, make it happen. If this is soccer's moment, meaning we have more interest in pro soccer than we've ever had before, then leverage that by launching clubs. If it crosses a line when we talk about whether people are being exploited. Rob, that's where it gets very problematic. Like, oh, if players are being treated poorly, they're not playing in professional conditions, they're not being paid enough, they're forced to shower in disgusting shower, like although if those things are part, you don't want that. But as long as there's some commitment to a professional environment that isn't exploiting people, and that could be employees otherwise in the club as well, or again, taking handouts from the government that doesn't get used in a way that benefits everybody in the community, whether they're a soccer fan or not, I think it's okay to just like try it. If we don't try, we don't know if it'll work. Does that make sense? Like if we try, the perfect becomes the enemy of good when we talk about launching soccer clubs.
Perfect enemy of good. That's an interesting way to kind of wrap our minds around and kind of filter that. As we wait for our guests to join us into the comments again, one of our most ardent and supportive MK Ultras directing us. Fort Wayne Stadium is not downtown, but is being built with private funds without help from the city, and the restrictions tied to that
Yeah,
relationship.
and look, again, this is great. Thank you, Ryan, because this is good. This is good insight into one particular situation in Fort Wayne. And I do think that again, the ideal is every stadium gets built with private funds. Period. End of story. But if you are talking about we don't want to be downtown or we want to be in the suburbs or outside of the city, we want to be downtown. If that becomes a thing, you're going to have to interact with city government. You're going to have to find ways to make it worthwhile for everybody. You may need some help from a business perspective. Again, I don't want to give away free money because then that risks it being abused. But if there is a truly symbiotic relationship between private enterprise and the government and civic money, then it can be beneficial for everybody, right? In ways that are more than just economic, but obviously you kind of have to show that economic impact to sort of justify all of that. And as for the complications, that Ryan mentions that can come up from taking public money. I mean, that absolutely is a thing, right? Restrictions tied to the relationship. If you take public handouts, you may have to meet requirements. Although we've seen in cases where an agreement was made and it's like, well, you got to provide 300 units of housing, of affordable housing, and they're like, well, actually, we can't do that. Can we make it 150? And the government's like, you already started this project. We can't go back now. Okay, fine, 150, right? We that stuff gets real yucky.
Mentioning Fort Wayne, one of our other MK Ultras, Tom, aka the Soccer Zombie, gave us a big shout out for our coverage of the USL Players Union negotiation, and through that conversation, mentioned he tours the Midwest and actually the country visiting soccer games. And he mentioned going to Fort Wayne on 5-2. Obviously, there's a lot of MK Ultras interested in meeting up. So 5-2 in Fort Wayne might be a good meetup for Ultra Fest.
2nd, 2026. Hang out with the Soccer Zombie and rep Morning Kicker out a little bit. Say hi to Ryan, because I know he'll be there.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Another soccer team and stadium within a driving distance of Southeast Michigan. So Ultrafest, not the biggest lift of all time for yours truly. All right, our guest is with us now. So let's transition to today's hot topic here on Morning Kick Around. The hottest topic in American soccer right now, with under a month to go, the USL and the USLPA do not get into the legal ramifications, what tactics we might see, whether a work stoppage is possible. We are now joined by the soccer lawyer, Andrew Wisnowski, senior counsel at Vela Wood. Welcome back,
Mr. It's great to be back. How's it going?
Looking at Andrew repping his town there. All right, let's start with the basics here, Andrew. Nothing has happened as far as we can tell that means these two sides are closer to an agreement than they were months and months ago, even before the agreement expired. So what's your current reading, based on what we can know, your current reading of the situation between the USL and the USLPA?
It seems to me they're still a little bit apart on their numbers. And I think the toughest part for USL is that they are growing at an incredible pace, and that is a great thing when you are a business. It is a terrible thing when you're doing labor negotiations and you're trying to set a precedent where you're trying to keep jumps in salary and employee costs down. And so it's very hard for them to argue and justify, hey, we're not making a whole lot of money. We don't have a lot of money coming in, when they're flush with cash. There's tons of very wealthy owners coming in, and they're talking about expanding into the first division, not even talking about it, like announcing that they're going to. And so that puts them in a tough spot in terms of, a lot of times these leagues will argue that they're poor and that they're not making enough money to sustain themselves, and so they need to keep the numbers down. And so that's really tough for the USL. On the player side, it's tough because they're sort of bumping up against the American minor league system and the international soccer system, where minor leagues and international soccer are basically treated essentially the same in terms of labor as the professional as the first divisions. And so they want something that looks more like that, right? And they want to make it so that the transition and the difference between their leagues and the first division leagues is much more narrow, where which makes their request for a big jump harder. There's been discussion about the players having made a lot of concessions in the first negotiation just to have it. I think the first negotiation was right on the heels of COVID as well. And so they made, according to them, made big concessions based off of the idea that they were going to expand and get a bigger jump later. And so I think that's where the impasse is that they were expecting this big jump in pay and in benefits, and the league wants to take a much more stepped approach, I think is the language that the league has said. So something like more akin to like a normal jump in pay and benefits and stuff like that than the big jump that the USLPA wants.
So in a situation like this seems like a kind of unusual situation. It seems like both parties at the negotiation table are both somewhat vulnerable. Obviously, the players, they're not on NBA style contracts, and they don't have millions of dollars to just, sit on until they get the deal that's 100% what they want. But also, you laid it out that the league, the management side, are in a vulnerable position. They have big plans, big expansion, but maybe light on funds. So who has the upper hand in these negotiations?
I mean, I think it's hard to say. I think the players have a little bit more leverage than, say, the MLS PA would, relative to the league and the ownership, only insofar as their league is much more bound by domestic players and players within their current player pool. And so MLS can kind of say, hey, we're going to bring in ringers, we're going to bring in international players if things get really bad, right? If we get into like a replacements level situation, the replacements in MLS are players from abroad, players outside the league, and then lower division players. USL doesn't really have that because all of the lower division players that are available are in the USLPA, either in the championship or in League One. And I don't think that League One players that are in the union are going to cross a picket line and take a job. So then what does that player pool look like for replacement players? I don't know. It's semi-pro guys. It's recent college graduates. It's pulling guys out of college, I guess. They can't really go to the international market.
Well, so let me just pause you there for a second, Andrew, because I think the natural question to ask off of this is if it does go in that direction and the USL starts looking at scabs, there's obviously going to be a quality drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you wonder if USL is calculating that maybe it doesn't matter as much for them that there would be a quality drop-off. I wonder if you have a sense of that.
I think that's a fair point. I think, I mean, obviously the USL is closer to the floor than like the NFL is or the NBA is as well. And in minor league sports in America, the business model has always been sort of an entertaining night out, not necessarily a focus on the competitive side of the game. And so these lower league teams have like decent supporters groups and have supporters, but a much bigger chunk of their fans are casual people that might go to one or two games that don't really follow the team and won't really notice the drop off. And so like the thing that I really enjoy is not, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but like find very interesting about labor negotiations is the push and pull of leverage for both sides is kind of is very much like a seesaw in that there's any bit of leverage that one side has usually provides some sort of leverage for the other side, if that makes sense. And so it's really fascinating to me. It's really a game of chicken, right? Like it's who's going to break first and who's going to deal, and that's the problem, right? Because these USL Championship players aren't making a whole lot of money, so they can't.
Right. So this is obviously what Rob was alluding to. So in order in this game of chicken, your nuclear option is strike on one side and lockout on the other, and again, there's so much at risk for everybody that it seems very unlikely anybody will actually do one of those things, which then means what is the actual timeline on this, Andrew? Because they keep coming out with announcements about what they plan to do in the future. They're getting ready to launch their 2026 season, which on the back of that news should be a very big deal for them. And I guess as long as it's like we're not actually stopping this negotiation, we just continue on with basically no momentum in this process.
I mean, yeah, I think the 2026 and 2027 seasons for professional soccer teams in the United States are obviously very big, important seasons that they need to get right to maximize the benefit off of the World Cup and the hype leading up to the World Cup. I don't know. I think ultimately they will get something sorted out before the start of the season. I think neither side wants to have any sort of work stoppage. I think it'll be really tough for them, for either side to recover if they have to reschedule games or reschedule an off season or something like that, or even piece together some sort of replacement level games. But my feeling is usually these people push it to the wire and then both sides kind of break and concessions are made and things net out and an agreement comes to pass. I think it's tough now because we're sort of cutting into preseason and off-season preseason training and the transfer window. The international transfer window can't be moved, and that ends in April. So they've lost a bunch of months during the off-season to bring in players, and I don't think they can register players during a lockout. Register new players at least in the international market that they intend on keeping. Could be because it's a lockout. So my guess is that this is sorted within the next couple weeks. But it really it's sometimes it doesn't, and it's really hard. It's really hard to tell based off of how far they are apart. It's really hard for me to get a sense of how far apart they are. It seems like they get close and then the PA will put out a statement and say like they're not treating us like the professionals that we are. And when that happens, then it's like, okay, well then how much longer do we have until we get?
Well, this is what I say every time we report on what the USLPA has put on their socials. What I say is, okay, we can debate whether the level is elevated, but this is pretty standard stuff from the players' side, and the USL side. They're not going to say a word. It doesn't benefit them at all to be public with any of this. So when you look at the USLPA's post, indicative of we're not as close as maybe we thought they might be. Is there anything in the character of the post that stands out, or is this pretty much boilerplate stuff?
To me, it seems pretty standard. I think the Players Association is always going to puff out their chest a little bit during negotiations and sort of stand firm on like, these are the things we want. We're not going to budge until we get them, until it gets to the point where they're like, oh yeah, we can live with that. I think it's also harder in negotiations like these because certain details of the CBA that in a higher level, in a first division league, an NBA or NFL, the details aren't like super important and they're not fighting over, but in a lower division where the salary is lower, that stuff is a bigger deal. I think the biggest thing is like healthcare and health insurance, and that seems like a really big topic of controversy in this round of CBA negotiation. And from my time working in the MLS league office and working with players and agents in MLS, like we have no questions about healthcare and health insurance.
Right.
Not even like a section of the CBA that I know very well.
It's a matter of livable. We're talking about a level. It's livable stuff for these players. Whereas when you talk about those big ones that we are very aware of, NHL, NBA, all that stuff, it's really just we deserve a bigger share of the mountain of money that you're making.
Exactly.
And that's not what's happening here, because nobody is under any illusions that there's a whole lot of money splashing about, which is definitely different.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think there's two sides of that like money splashing around question. One is how much these teams are making, and the other is how much money is coming into the league through ownership and how much money the ownership has and is willing to invest in these teams. And if they're willing to invest money in franchise fees and stadium construction and all of that, when does that get translated into player salaries?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like you need a stadium to play in, understandable, right? You need to pay the franchise fees, understandable, but you also need players.
Yeah, and when the franchise fees are going up by however incremental amount, then the question is, why isn't the player salary going up by that amount?
I mean, it's a tale as old as time. That management is always the first place they go to save money is labor. That's always the restaurant, soccer. It doesn't matter. You're always looking to cut labor. And I mean, never mind. I was gonna make a personal comment about my professional situation, but I'll leave that aside. I again, like, so I guess we come back to this issue, Andrew, of the players are being asked owners until down the road things are better and you can get your piece of the pie to be a little bit bigger. MLS players were sold this as well. And I guess it's really tough it's tough as a fan. I think it's natural to fall on Labor's side. I think a lot of people are on Labor's side, but then there is that specter of, well, what if we don't have our team? What if my team's not playing this year? What if there are no games because the players, maybe righteously so, are standing up for themselves? At what point does it become, let's all, again, as I heard from so many MLS players over the years, you just got to do this because we're in this together.
Yeah, I mean, I think those questions are really real. I think in lower division soccer in the United States, those are even more real because there's a lot more frequently teams fold or go on hiatus or struggle to keep their doors open and struggle with revenue. And I think there's always a time where labor and management need to come together and figure out what is best for the enterprise to keep the enterprise going long term, because if the enterprise doesn't exist, employment can't happen with that enterprise. But it's also the way that the league and these clubs are thinking about things. And there's another layer of complication because the USL is set up in a way where the league is kind of a separate business entity from the clubs. And the clubs all have very different financial interests and motivations, both from each other and from the league. And so it's like almost the opposite of MLS, where MLS is like this big monolith. USL is kind of a bunch of different people wanting different things. But there's this question of how much you are willing to give, and then what is an untenable amount to give just for the sake of the longevity of the enterprise. I think it's a really hard question. I don't like. I wonder how many MLS teams are in the black and making money.
Sure.
USL teams are making, like, their only revenue is gate revenue at this point.
Mhm.
They're not selling shirts. Their media deals are almost non-existent, and I think those are locked up mostly with the league office. And I think the question is, like, how do we determine an investment in these teams, right? And it has to be an investment in players as well, because they're the reason why people show up. But as we know from the history of U.S. soccer, if you overinvest in players, the league itself can become unsustainable. But I will say, I think, given the level of wealth of people trying to get into North American soccer, the situation is very different from
Yeah.
the NASL of the 1970s and the financial risk involved with those teams. I think if there's a person on ownership that has a B in their net worth at the beginning of the word after the number of their net worth, they can sustain a team paying players a decent wage and sustain losses for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it just depends on their level of commitment of what they want to do. But those people are not buying into. I mean, it is sort of like an ego game for them, but it's also they're buying into a business that they want to make money eventually. And I think that's the thing when we talk about labor and we talk about all of this, that we kind of throw by the wayside, is that, like, the goal at the end of the day for all of these teams is to be a profitable enterprise. That's why they exist. That's why people are putting money into them.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to dig yourself out of the hole of the debt that you're building as well.
Yeah, this matter definitely getting into the heart. Are these community assets? Are these profit-driven organizations?
But keep in mind too that I think what you're seeing this at the MLS level, right? It's maybe you want to make money just because anybody wants a profitable business, but you're also gaining equity in the value of your club that one day you can realize. So you may only be making money on paper until the club is sold, but you are eventually going to realize that money, which is happening, I think, starting to happen at the lower division level now, and will change the complexion of things pretty dramatically.
I think that's right. To build that value, you have to build up goodwill with the community, and the way you do that is by having competitive teams that win trophies, that have dynamic players that people want to go pay a ticket to go see. And so you have to balance the cost of doing that. Like, you're not going to be able to charge an arm and a leg to go see a USL team in terms of, like, tickets and things like that. And so to get that return on investment, that equity benefit, you have to make the teams accessible, and you have to make the teams something that people want to go see, right? Because that's the only way the value of the team goes up.
Absolutely.
Because of that like, price value is the concept of how much money, how well the team is going to make money in the future.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have that grow, you have to have something that's driving people into seats and in front of screens to watch your team.
Indeed. With under 3 weeks to go until the USL Championship season starts, it's supposed to start the weekend of March 6th and 7th. So under 3 weeks to go until games are supposed to happen. So we got a bit of a game of chicken. Who will blink first, or will there be a resolution? But Andrew Wisnowski, the soccer lawyer, thank you for breaking it down. We've wanted another voice in on this topic, and thank you so much for joining us and providing it.
No problem, guys. Thank you.
Thank you to Andrew. Yeah, I mean, we could probably have done another hour with Andrew on this topic, I think. But hopefully that gets us just a little bit more of a reframe on where things are and the pressures that are at play, Rob.
Yes, definitely. And I'm curious to see if anything dramatic happens. What will management or maybe the Players Association do? Is there a Hail Mary? Is there another option?
There's always a chance, just by Murphy's Law or whatever the law of the law of timing, that we did that incredibly informative interview with a guy who knows his stuff in Andrew Visnofsky, and then by the time we post this thing later, they'll have an agreement done. It'll all be moot. I mean, we can only hope, right?
I mean, for soccer fans, that would be the hope. And thank you to all of our MK Ultras and our viewers for getting into the chat, keeping the conversation moving. Thank you to Mr. Bob for donating to the show. Thank you. And he reiterates a great point for Wednesday, going for a successful Kickathon 2026 in order to up the levels here, Morning Kick Around, maybe expand our reach and the amount of shows that we do each and every week. But we have at least one more segment to go here on Friday's Morning Kick Around, so let's move it on up. Right on here, it is February 13th. It is a Friday morning kick around here. Final segment of the week. News came out just this week that armchair analyst, one of Major League Soccer's foremost voices on MajorLeagueSoccer.com, has been relieved of duty, pouring out outcry of what is the state of media covering soccer in this country. And my question is, what is the point of laying off one of your foremost voices and experts?
Yeah, so Matt Doyle, who has been the armchair analyst at MLSsoccer.com for the last 15 years. And look, I'm going to guess even people who don't love MLS know who Matt Doyle is and have probably come across his work. And he has written in the past, not just on Major League Soccer and its teams and its tactics. He has also written on the U.S. men's national team fairly in depth. So you probably come across his work in that regard as well. So as Rob just said on Wednesday, Matt announced that he had been relieved of his duties. He had been let go by Major League Soccer, that he was going to go and move to Ghost, the newsletter platform that I'm also on, by the way. So follow him and subscribe to that. And he's monetizing that platform because he lost his job. He's also part of the Kickback media crew now, doing podcasts on various American soccer topics. Which
MLS Refugee Network.
Soccer wise, what else do they do? Anyway, they do a bunch of stuff over there. And this naturally spawned a discussion about the state of American soccer media. And while I'm not a media expert, meaning that's not my area of focus all the time, I have lived experience here, right? So I've been part of the American soccer media community since 2009, let's say 2009. Right. So I started my blog in very late 2008. I got a little bit of attention in 2009. I'm doing podcasts. I start covering games. I start to get an opportunity to travel a little bit. Eventually down the line, I have a different successful podcast. I start a different show. I get the radio gig in 2015. I was writing through most of that time for various outlets, including ESPN and The Guardian and all these other places. So, I've been in this, and I think when I think back to those years, I think we all had this sense that we were in the beginning of what would lead to an explosion of soccer coverage. Like some of us may have thought of ourselves as trailblazers. I don't know that I did. I was just a guy trying to make a little bit of money, because I didn't have much of that, and I loved the game. I don't know that, but we did think certainly that the way we were seeing it wasn't going to be the way it would be in the future, right? And that was based on the presumed growth of MLS, the presumed improvement to the U.S. men's national team, the idea that a World Cup would come back to America, which 2010 we missed out when we lost out to Qatar, 2000, but obviously eventually got the World Cup. And I think there was a sense like soccer's growing, soccer's expanding, more people like soccer every year. That will naturally lead to more permanent jobs or more full-time jobs covering the game, and we'll have a robust media environment for American soccer. And Rob, again, I'm standing inside of it. I've been working in this business for a long time. I'm lucky enough to have a job that pays me a living wage working on the radio. But what do you think about the state of American soccer? Because you worked in it a little bit, got your toes wet, covering the Fire. So what do you think about where we were then, where we are now, and how it looks?
Well, it's wild that you're talking about those formative years, the early teens or so. Matt Doyle and Extra Time Radio, they seem like the platform, the basis, the core of what this is, and for other jobs and other outlets to then spawn from that. And it seemed like it was the base for then for it all to grow. MLSsoccer.com was providing some, basically covering themselves, and it looked like it was going to keep growing. But you're talking about the media landscape. It actually seems like it's constricting, and those that did have those official jobs are going away. And even those people at the core that had the corporate jobs are having to go independent like everyone else is or was over the last decade or so.
Let's be clear that there's been a contraction of media across the board. This is not just about American soccer. This is about everything, right? How many Substacks, how many newsletters, how many independent sites have been launched by people that formerly worked for legacy media outlets? So that's a major part of this. Now, I also have a theory that when it comes to soccer, because what happened in, say, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, or even beyond sports, what you had is a bunch of legacy media outlets that were doing all that work. People were paid to be beat reporters. They were paid to be analysts. They were paid to be opinion columnists. They were paid to do all this stuff. And it was very robust. It was very, that's where you went to get your sports or to get your coverage. And then obviously what has happened is the digital landscape has fractured all that. For soccer, we never had the foundation. It didn't exist, right? We had people that went back to the days of Soccer America's birth. Like, we had a smattering of people that had been doing it for a long time that were part of the community that you could say, "Oh, that guy." But they were also unicorns in the fact that they had been covering soccer since the 70s. It's like, "Oh my God, you were there." We didn't have the type of people that like existed in that, the world of newspapers and television and things where it's like, yeah, that person is part of our community. And
it's an incomplete and fractured ecosystem.
There was no like we had like one guy who could say it's kind of like Peter King, but we didn't have 10 or 12 Peter Kings, right? The NFL had 10 or 12 Peter Kings and more than that even. And obviously, again, part of the mainstream conversation, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, or all of the big events in golf and in tennis, things like that would get coverage on those major networks in the newspaper. Soccer was left out of that for the most part, right? A brief moment when Pelé was here, a little bit of a bump in 94 with the World Cup, a smattering of MLS stories, David Beckham arrives, things like it had to be this big event in order for American soccer to get mentioned in the pages of the newspapers and on television in a way that felt like it was part of the mainstream. So when the contraction happened and when the fracturing of the digital landscape happened, the media landscape, soccer didn't have like already that baseline, which then it was just kind of like maybe being reduced. We just didn't have it. We didn't get there, right? And that's the frustrating thing for me as somebody who's worked in this business is like, I was dreaming of the day when every major newspaper in an MLS town had a beat reporter. Because that's what you do. You cover the big teams in town. And we're not.
That was largely my point of what I thought everything was going to spring off of. Was I got the centralized league content, and then, that would spread around from town to town, but it actually reduced it, right?
But I don't know. Okay, again, the fracturing of the media landscape is independent of soccer. But I did argue back in 2010, and I still think that there's some truth to this, even though lots of things have happened in the interim, that MLS bringing their coverage in-house was actually going to be to the detriment of coverage outside of the league website, right? Because it's impossible for people not to see the league's website as the authoritative voice on the league, right? Now, some people might be more discerning. I mean, like I was a person who like, well, okay, that might be good coverage, but I know it's not going to be truly independent, so I'll go look for something somewhere else. But not enough people were doing that, right? So what you told the average soccer fan is, if you want coverage of Major League Soccer, you got to go to MLSsoccer.com. Right. And there's a baked in conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
Even if the people inside, and I have emails from people who worked at MLSsoccer.com who are no longer there, obviously, who said, I understand exactly what you were saying with that conflict of interest thing, because we talked about it all the time. Because do you think that those guys were just immune from being yelled at by MLS executives if they put something on the website that was slightly off, that painted the league in a slightly negative light? Those restrictions are. That's a problem for a league that wants to explode its narratives. It can't always be sunshine and rainbows. You need people who are willing to call to task the powers that be. You certainly need you need an environment where it's fully realized, 360 degrees. And again, this is not anything about Matt Doyle or anybody else who's written for MLSsoccer.com. My friend Charlie Boehm, Joe Lowry was there, Tom Bogert was there, Dave Gass was there, Simon Borg was there, Jonah Friedman was there, Jason Sagini. I'm just naming off people who worked there. And again, lots of good journalists, smart soccer people worked at MLSsoccer.com. I was offered a job. I didn't take it, not because I had any issues with the conflict of interest at the time. I just didn't have time in my life for it. But again, I think there's something to be said for, because we didn't have that base the way that the other sports do. When MLS brought their coverage in-house, or whenever MLS decided to cover itself, it created one central location for all of this, and now they've exploded it. And what is there? There's a piecemeal independent network of websites and blogs and newsletters and those kind of and podcasts. And every single one of them, there are some amateurs doing very good work, but they're still going to be amateurs, right? They can't possibly be putting the hours necessary to give the game its proper respect and coverage. And those that are semi-pro are scraping by. There's lots of independent websites that are going to ask you to pay money for their coverage. And how many websites can you pay for, right? Like, I definitely think Matt Doyle is going to be worth it. I think he's got $50 a year. You can get access to Matt Doyle's coverage. That's probably going to be worth it. And maybe you pick that one over a different one. So again, maybe these local websites that are covering individual MLS teams miss out on some money now because somebody's got to make a choice. And there's no national conversation, no coherent national conversation around Major League Soccer. Because again, MLS made its coverage the center of all of that. So it didn't trickle out. It didn't become part of sports talk radio in a significant way because nobody was doing that work. Newspapers weren't covering. And you could say, well, that's just about MLS and its failure to capture attention. And I am sympathetic to that view. But I think this is a myriad of factors have created an environment where we are not seeing our sport, our top league, covered the way it should be covered.
Yeah, and that's part and parcel of when we say some things that MLS super fans might feel that are contradictory or pulling down the league in some way, because Major League Soccer's done a lot of things and it's the leading league in domestic world. But I think that people like myself and others that do say things negatively about Major League Soccer, they want the first division, the biggest league in the country, to do more and hold a bigger part of our sports conversation in a broader way than it is now. But my question is to you now. I mean, we started this conversation off as like, what's the point? What is the point of laying him off?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we were talking about with Andrew Wisnowski about USL.
I mean, how much money is? I mean, I understand he's long tenured at that company, but I mean, honestly, we had a segment on valuations of teams into the billions, and those teams are all part of single entities. So if those teams, hopefully, that translates to the league being worth billions. And
okay, actually,
does that salary really take a dent in those billions valuations?
I doubt that Matthew Doyle's salary is any more than just a very small piece of their budget.
Yeah.
But this is the way that these businesses, these corporations work. Everything is a department, and every department has a budget, right? And again, you're not looking at what does Matt Doyle do for us in the big picture. You're looking at what Matt Doyle does for just the website, with the traffic he drives, with the, what's the messaging here? What's our approach to what value does this bring? Right? This is the consultant's way of thinking about this. What value does this bring? And it's not just, and again, I think what's frustrating for me is that if you go back to the late aughts or early teens, when we were talking about when I jumped into this, when you talk about where we are now, the right thing to have done back then for the league and for the clubs and for the independent third-party media enterprises who had a choice to cover MLS was to build a domestic network of coverage, right? To invest in authentic voices covering the sport from a passionate perspective here in the United States. And sometimes you're going to hear me get a little cranky about where some of the money invested in soccer and soccer media goes in this country. Like there's a certain network founded by a couple of English gentlemen that I'm not a fan of. I'm not fond of. I have friends who are getting paid by them. Good for them. I'm not a fan of that because I think ultimately, even if they weren't insidious in their intent, they have undermined the ability of American soccer to create its own organic media sphere. Right? Because what did we do? We turned our attention to the guys with the accent and said, oh, well, they know what they're talking about. And I know, they're American as anybody else at this point, but we didn't trust ourselves to build that discussion, the environment ourselves. We didn't do that. People with the money who had the ability to pay people, right? Like, for example, I know he's young. He wasn't around in those early teen years. But if Joe Lowry was around in 2010, 2011, somebody should have invested in Joe Lowry as a centerpiece of their soccer media enterprise, covering the American game, right? Because the other thing is, like, it's clear that a lot of people looked at European football and went, hey, we can make money off of that. Americans like that too. And it's already there. It's already established. And the media over there is already doing all the work for us. Right? There's already a deep network of people covering. It's baked into the culture of England and Italy and Spain and Germany and France to cover the sport. All we have to do is tap into that. Right? That's a shortcut. And this is what I'm talking about. We didn't have that. Like, we didn't build that ourselves. We took our attention elsewhere. The money went elsewhere. The inability to look long term at this, to understand that it takes a long time to get to where you want to go, but you're going to reap the rewards on the other end of it, is what's frustrating me. And you could argue that MLS actually kind of did make that decision by launching an editorial arm, that they didn't see anybody else doing it. And again, maybe there's a knock-on effect that they couldn't have worried themselves with too much to say that because they sucked up so much of the oxygen, that meant nobody else was going to be able to build around them.
Yeah, that was the
Right?
point
And
I was going to make. There's plenty of independent journalists and bloggers and podcasters across the country that decreed or lamented that they were kind of shut out of the conversation.
Yeah, because again, if I'm an MLS fan, where am I going to go? I'm a league source, extra time radio, fine product. Matt Doyle, Andrew Wiebe, all these people, Charlie Boehm, writing at the website, fine product, right? They are just the biggest gravity, right? They have the biggest gravity. So then if you launch an independent website or you are trying to get attention for what you're doing somewhere else. Now, if you're backed by a major newspaper, obviously the problem is newspapers, not necessarily soccer, although I think that's an element of it. But a lot of these places, I mean, look, ESPN, Fox, NBC, name some of the major sports outlets that were part of our experience. Like I'm somebody who grew up watching ESPN 24 hours a day, essentially.
ESPN, Fox Sports, Fox Soccer Channel,
They made some efforts back in the day. They had a couple of MLS focused shows. But again, once it was clear that somebody else is going to do most of that work, that you're going to be competing with the league itself, why bother too much with it? Again, and nobody had patience. Everybody wanted immediate return. Oh, there's only so many people watching. Only 50,000 people watch that thing that they did on MLS. Well, it must suck. It must be terrible. We have to get rid of it and stop doing it. And again, like it's a what have you done for me lately environment. And maybe that's just an impossible issue to get around. Maybe it is.
Tom brought up an interesting point. Obviously, we don't like to see, the editorial arm or the experts leave MLSsoccer.com, but he does bring up the point of he's excited to see someone with such knowledge of Major League Soccer write and report without fear of backlash from the corporate heads.
Right. Well, but again, in a different environment, right? In a different, again, maybe I'm just wish casting here, and this isn't based in any reality that could have existed, but in a different environment, Matthew Doyle gets a job somewhere else back when he got hired by MLSsoccer.com. And somebody there in that lets him be truly free to not only do what he's good at, which is break down the league tactically, which is talk about roster construction, which is give you a real sense of the competitive balance of the league, but also to write things a little bit less constrained, right?
Yeah,
A little less
totally
constrict.
agree. Even if even if the bosses don't come in to the room
Yeah.
and say you got to pull that article down, it's in the back of your mind. Are my bosses going to have a problem with this? Is this too negative? Does this even dip into the gray area?
Yeah.
I mean, a great example of extra time radio getting in some tricky waters was them not mentioning the Columbus Crew efforts. To Save the Crew was a sticky time. So the biggest show for Major League Soccer wasn't able to cover the biggest story at that time.
Yeah, and look, again, this is self-serving, so I acknowledge this, okay? Let's just know that I acknowledge that this is self-serving for me, your friendly neighborhood soccer guy, Jason Davis, who is still on the radio talking about soccer 5 days a week. But I spent nearly 10 years, 8 years, I think, doing 3 hours on American soccer every day on Sirius XM FC. And when it came down to, hey, we're going to adjust the channel, we're going to make some changes to labor costs. What product, what show, what topic was the first one to go?
Americano.
American soccer was the first one to go. Now, I'm sure some people who don't like me would say, well, that's on Jason. Jason's show sucked. Why? Of course they cut Jason's show. It's terrible. And look, I'm not saying I was everybody's cup of tea, but I was covering American soccer as if it was the most important version of the game, because I do think that that's a necessary way of thinking about the sport in your country. If you want the sport in your country, the domestic version of your sport, to be a big deal, you have to act like it's a big deal. You can't always be looking at this ironically or winking at it. And now MLSsoccer.com, for the most part, didn't wink at it. I give them credit for that. Right? But that's a thing that we have now where it feels as if something has been missed. And the opportunity, and maybe this was always a problem, because I've written on this a lot as well. If you want to see me, if you want to hear, read my writings on this, Soccer Eagle, Jason Davis Soccer Eagle, go look for that newsletter. It's on Ghost. American soccer did not get a chance to incubate, to grow, to trust itself without the outside world pressing down on it in every way, shape, and form. And I mean that in judgment, because every one of us has had a conversation with somebody about how American soccer is terrible. We shouldn't even bother with it. What are you doing, Yanks? Stop playing soccer. You have throw ball and handbag.
Is it even professional?
Yeah. Right. Everybody down the pub thinks that they could be in MLS in England. Everybody sitting there drinking multiple pints with a beer belly out, touching the bar, thinks they could be in MLS because MLS is trash. Right. So, we have that. Then we have people who come here and see professional opportunity in American soccer, who bring with them that the most important thing somebody who talks about soccer can have in America, and that's a British accent. Right. And I work with a lot of Brits. I like a lot of Brits. Some of my oldest friends in soccer are Englishmen. And they're almost all of them have the best intentions. They want to see American soccer grow. They are part of that story. But it is undeniable that there are certain people with British accents who have benefited from those accents in ways in America. You could be the most entertaining soccer person on the planet talking about MLS, but if you don't have a British accent, nobody pays attention to you.
I'm sure this conversation can translate into the coaching world as well. There's plenty of American coaches that don't get that job.
Absolutely. And not just American coaches who are looked down upon because they're American, but British coaches who come here who scam their way into jobs they really don't deserve because they have British accents. Okay. And this all comes back to the fact that we as Americans don't trust ourselves with this game. We don't. And maybe we could never have done it because we share so much culturally with the English, and who thinks they are the
owners of the game.
Yeah. The ones who get to tell everybody else how to do it. It is the English. So, I mean, again, all of this is to say it's a very disappointing moment for American soccer media. And I hope there are better things ahead, right? I hope there are more. At the very least, I hope there are more people who get to be paid a living wage as full-time soccer people in this country, because that's really, for me, the major measure of where we are. And there are still very few full-time soccer jobs in these United States of America.
With that in mind, next week we are fundraising for this very program. We are an independent show and we have to fundraise to try to boost our 2026. And as you're talking about English accents, I thought maybe part of an investment into this show is I go back to England for about a month, reestablish my English accent, come by, and this show is going to go gangbusters.
I don't know, man. The Michigan and English together, like that's like oil and water, isn't it? Like,
Okay, I don't think it's necessarily a great personality trait of mine, but if I go over there, I will get my English accent back, and I come here. I kind of
Do not.
I'm a bit of a chameleon that way. Like I said, not necessarily a great personality trait, but I could pick up an English accent if I went over there.
Don't feel bad about that. I think a lot of people. I'm that way as well. Don't worry, I'm that way as well. I mean,
when you go to Arizona, you start talking different or something? What do you mean?
No, I mean, I was a military brat. I've traveled a lot in this country in particular, but you know, if you put me around people that all have the same accent from wherever they are, I will probably start to sound like that. Except for Wisconsin, I refuse. I absolutely reject anything Wisconsin accent. But otherwise, I'll start sounding a little bit more Southern if I go down south and I'm with family that lives there. I'll certainly sound more Western if I'm out in Colorado and those places where my family is originally from.
All right, Jenny, you got to clip it when he starts saying y'all on this show.
That'll be tough. That's a tough sell. I feel weird saying y'all, even though I could claim it. I could claim y'all. I don't. I got family from the South. I lived in Alabama multiple times. I could say y'all. I write y'all maybe occasionally, but I don't say it. That's the thing. I don't say ain't. I can't do ain't. Cannot. But anyway,
I bet if I went to Canada for a little bit, I would start saying A. I say A in my text messaging for some reason, but I haven't adapted it to my speech. And maybe if I went over the bridge, if the new bridge gets opened, I'll check that out and maybe see if I adapt.
Can you go to Pittsburgh? A's. Can you spend some time in Pittsburgh? I'd love for you to come back with a Pittsburgh accent.
That might be fun, or maybe a Philadelphia one, but we shall see. And that all goes into our fundraising, and that'll add to our travel budget.
Yeah. Come to the kickathon on Wednesday of next week. Again, guest games, all this stuff, and anybody who gives to the show, supports the show, who buys us a super chat, who maybe becomes a member, new members, you can give us one word for both of us to pronounce. One word. You get to choose one word for us. We already had a Welsh town or something or whatever that was.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I don't want to pull that back up and another pronunciation challenge. Maybe we'll save that for one of our games for Wednesday as a pronunciation.
That's actually a really good idea to pick out some.
It's like half of us go through the members' screen names, and me try to the reading a screen name apparently is very, very challenging for me. And I don't know if we've run a little long today. Do we want to give a shout out to our new members out there?
Sure. Yes. Let's take the Kickathon banner down and give a shout out to some new members. How many we got? What do we got?
We have a number of new members because there was about, I think, 10 gifted earlier this week. And reminder, anyone who accepted a membership gift, set a reminder for a month from now to renew. You have to renew yourself those gift memberships, only a month long. Remember that. All right. Shout out to our new MK Ultras, James Toomey out in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Shout out to Robert McIntosh, someone called Shard4756. Then we got Jeffrey Reevely, then Thal, Antonio Yet Jr., SKK109, Prince L. Lee, Sri Kothur 2845, and then Ari Balas Shivas 91. So thank you all for joining us, becoming our MK Ultras. I'm not sure if we're dotting the map. We got the map up. We have at least 2. So let me dig into the Morning Kick Around Discord server amongst the benefits of becoming a channel member, and gonna dig in here and see who we can dot on our map. It looks like we have at least 2 to add to our map. we are going to Idaho. Roger, the River Guardian. He is in Boise, Idaho. Of course, he put his specific coordinates in here. I'll put those in our chat here.
I'm just gonna keep it Boise for now. We'll just keep it Boise, or he's not actually in Boise. He's in some of the other one of the other towns. But it doesn't matter. Let's just go with Boise. What this is Roger, our River Guardian. Is that what you said?
That's right, Roger, the River Guardian. And while Jason puts you on the map there,
I gotta make it official. I gotta make it official. So give me a second. As my computer just doesn't want to.
Oh,
there we go.
You've been dotted.
Now you've been dotted. We don't have a sound effect with that one yet. We're gonna figure out what that looks like. All right, Roger is spelled Rodger, right? Is that
That's
right?
the one. Yeah, that is correct. And like I was gonna say, anyone who hasn't seen it yet, recommend the latest Countdown to Kickoff, AC Boise with the River Guard. We had Ryan from the River Guard, one of the leaders of that supporters group. The team hasn't even started yet. They've got over 100 members, very active, great conversation with what this moment is just weeks before their team, kicks the ball in a real competitive match.
So there goes Roger. He's there. I don't know if I put River Guard just because that's the name of the supporters group. I don't know if he's a River Guardian because he's a member of the River Guard. Is that how that works?
His handle on Discord is Roger River Guardian. So I'm feeling pretty confident that he is indeed in the group.
Okay.
All right.
And in the spirit of the Discord, I'm posting a new Discord link right now. For anybody that is an ultra, it's on the YouTube channel. So go back to the YouTube channel, the main page, look at the posts, and find the new Discord link if you were not yet in the Discord. Continue, Rob. Sorry.
Our second dot on the map is going to go to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Mr. James Toomey is our MK Ultra. And I missed it in my shout out to new members, Johnson Felix 15. Why don't you let us know where you live? I think you might be in Michigan, but our brand new MK Ultra that joined during the show, Johnson Felix 15.
It's Rhode Island FC for James, right? We want to make sure we put in the clubs where we can. I know he's there in Pawtucket, so that would make sense, right? Yeah, James is somebody that we're getting to know a little bit, Rob and I, for reasons that may come to light later on. Okay, what else? I'm sorry. Well, you said what? I missed one. I was doing James's dot. What happened?
Our brand new member that joined during the show, Johnson Felix 15. He is from Rochester, Michigan.
Rochester, Michigan. Okay. Is that the more famous Rochester or the less famous Rochester, you think?
I mean, Rochester's a very nice town. They have beautiful lights and ice sculpture. Like they go all out for Christmas there in Rochester. All lit lights on the buildings, ice carving festivals, all sorts of stuff. A very lovely Christmas town, but more famous than Rochester, New York, I doubt it.
No, what's in Rochester, New York? I don't know if I've ever been there. I've been to upstate New York. I don't think I stopped in Rochester, so I don't know. There used to be.
It feels like one of those towns that used to be. This is the biggest city in North USA in 1875 or something like that.
It does sound like something like that would be true. I think Rochester's the town that nearly got an MLS team. They came very close.
RP Rhinos.
Yeah, and RIP Rhinos, Dead Soccer Club. I don't know if I have any Rhinos gear in this room. That would be a shocking omission if I don't have any Rochester Rhinos gears. And yes, Kodak started in Rochester, New York. That's their most famous company, I think.
Yeah, Rochester, New York, big city. I know, but yeah, like one of those that at one point there was probably a big boom in an industry that isn't quite as big.
Okay, sorry, I got lost. I was talking about Rochester and failed to actually put. Who am I putting on?
Rochester, Michigan.
Rochester, Michigan. I already did that. That's okay. I got confused. I was moving the map. There we go. Okay, Rochester, Michigan. We've already dotted it, and there's Felix. I'm assuming that it's Felix Johnson and not Johnson Felix, but you tell me if you want it differently. And again, whatever you want your label to be, it is up to you. And let us know if you want to put your club affiliations on there as well. Not only is this like visually just cool for us to be like, hey, look at all these people that are supporting Morning Kick Around and look at all these people that are part of our community. It's actually a resource. Like you can like, oh, I might want to go see a game in a place. Oh, is there an ultra who lives there? Maybe we can meet up. Maybe they could tell me about the town. How do I get tickets? This is going to become a networking thing. Like it is right now. It's a networking thing, right? We just talked about Fort Wayne in a meetup. Like this is happening.
Yeah, 5-2 in Fort Wayne might be ground zero for Ultra Fest, a gathering of ultras. And as we get closer to that date, we'll look in to see how official we can make it. But definitely Soccer Zombie Tom, Ryan, and a couple others interested in heading to Fort Wayne, Indiana at the beginning of April. And before we go, I think one more shout out to Kick-a-thon 2026, February 18th, next Wednesday. And so the big primary reasons to do the big show, obviously spread our net wider. We're asking different kind of people than we've had on the show to be our guests. So hopefully widening our footprint in that sense, going longer, more opportunity for more content and more of that, and allow us to do some fundraising, because the primary, the two-pronged needs for this show, obviously longevity, but part of that longevity is we have to trust and enable other people to do some of the things that we are having to do. AKA, biggest thing is media manager, getting our stuff chopped up, making clips, and getting it out into the world as much as possible. The internet is very much pay to play, but we would want to pay a person to do this labor, to have that personal touch, an authentic nature of the show, and get it all out to people by people in there. And the second prong would also be travel. We want On Location to be a major feature of this show. We've done one already, and then we've got a couple in the works that perhaps some with some help or otherwise. But if we had a kitty of funds in order to dip into to get ourselves to places or even meet up together, we want to get in the same room and record some more scripted out things at the same time. Give us some flexibility and add that in-person and on-location feel to this show is the major two things that a fundraising show is all about.
Those Rob said it. I'm not going to repeat any of those things he just said because that's redundant. But yeah, we are at that point. We're at that stage where we want this to be real. Like we want this to be a thing that you guys don't have to worry about it collapsing in the next couple of months. Right? The World Cup is coming. We want to be on the scene for that. Like I'm already kind of because this is how my insane brain works. I'm already kind of contemplating some things that I can do around the World Cup period. I'm still working out what my radio schedule is going to be, but I know I'm going to be covering the tournament. I know I'm going to get some chances to travel. That can lead to meetups. That can lead to perhaps live shows. If Rob can make it, we can time those out with my radio responsibilities. I want to be writing about the World Cup, so there's a good chance I might build in some of that written content to what you get here at Morning Kick Around. I mean, why wouldn't I put all that stuff under one umbrella? I mean, I have a newsletter right now that is kind of separate. Please subscribe to Jason Davis Soccer Eagle. But why not bring that in? Give you guys more value for what you're getting when you sign up to support Morning Kick Around. And as I said, we're building a network of fans and ultras and people that can support each other, especially when it comes to lower division soccer and grassroots soccer and small club soccer in America. Because, I'm going to steal here from somebody, but it takes a village to raise a soccer club, Rob, and we're like putting our village together. Like I think that is so cool about it's not even something I planned for. Like it's not even something that you and I were like, oh yeah, this is going to be a real important part of what we're doing. It just kind of naturally coalesced, and that is so fun. So join Morning Kick Around as an ultra to get all those benefits, and certainly again spread the word, help us out. The Kickathon is going to be the next launching point for the show.
Yep, we have great guests throughout the week, but yeah, the big show of the week next Wednesday, Kickathon 2026, 9:30 to 12:30 at the very least. We're going to have some special guests, some guests we haven't had before, some familiar favorites, some games, and some surprises to get in the mix there. So everyone, thank you who joined into the show today. Thank you to Andrew Wisnowski, the soccer lawyer, for that great interview during the show today. And then everybody enjoy your weekend. Stay warm, stay brave, y'all. And until next time, enjoy your soccer.